That necklace. The old woman's voice, sharp as a shard of glass, cut through the polite lunch chatter. All eyes swung to the young waitress, Anna, and the tarnished silver star at her throat. Eleanor Vance, a name whispered with reverence, pointed a trembling finger. It belonged to my daughter. Anna's world tilted. Student debt and ramen dinners were one thing, but this was about to get ugly. What Vance didn't know, what no one in that hushed, judgmental room suspected, was that Anna's only connection to her unknown past dangled precariously, about to become a weapon. A weapon of kindness and resilience she has unknowingly honed for 24 years. They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. That necklace. The old woman's voice, sharp as a shard of glass, cut through the polite lunch chatter. All eyes swung to the young waitress, Anna, and the tarnished silver star at her throat. Eleanor Vance, a name whispered with reverence, pointed a trembling finger. It belonged to my daughter. Anna's world tilted. Student debt and ramen dinners were one thing, but this was about to get ugly. What Vance didn't know, what no one in that hushed, judgmental room suspected, was that Anna's only connection to her unknown past dangled precariously, about to become a weapon. A weapon of kindness and resilience she has unknowingly honed for 24 years. They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. The bell above the gilded spoon's door, usually a merry jingle promising relief from mounting bills, now tolled like a death knell. Anna had learned to love the sound, a constant reminder that each clink of silverware and whispered conversation brought her closer to solvency. But today, as the delicate notes faded, a chilling silence swept through the restaurant, an omen of the elegant storm that had just swept in. Eleanor Vance. The name hung heavy in the air, unspoken but universally recognized. She was a titan of industry, a matriarch of old money, a woman whose presence commanded attention like a spotlight. Her Chanel coat, a tapestry of woven threads and silent luxury, whispered of a fortune that dwarfed Anna's wildest dreams. Her gaze, sharp and piercing, scanned the room, missing nothing. It lingered on the floral arrangements, the impeccable table settings, the deferential staff. Then it locked onto Anna. A gasp, raw and visceral, escaped Eleanor's lips. It was the sound of a dam breaking, a lifetime of carefully constructed composure, cracking under immense pressure. Forks clattered against porcelain, conversations died in their infancy, and the gentle clinking of ice in glasses ceased. The entire restaurant held its breath, suspended in the bizarre tableau. That necklace, Eleanor rasped, her voice trembling with an emotion Anna couldn't decipher. Instinctively, Anna's hand flew to her throat, her fingers closing around the cool, familiar shape of the silver star. It was a simple design, 5 points radiating from a central sapphire chip, a blue spark in the tarnished metal. It was more than just jewelry. It was her anchor, her only tangible link to a past shrouded in mystery. Foundling, orphan, words that defined her existence until this very moment. Ma'am? Anna's voice, barely a whisper, felt fragile against the suffocating silence. Eleanor Vance took a step closer, her regal frame trembling. A younger man, handsome with kind eyes mirroring Eleanor's but tempered with a gentle understanding, placed a restraining hand on her arm. Mother, please, let's not do this here. Richard, look! Eleanor's voice rose, laced with a pain so profound it was almost unbearable. It's Amelia's, her star. I gave it to her when she turned 16. There isn't another like it. A wave of scrutiny crashed over Anna. Every eye in the restaurant was fixed on her, judging, dissecting. She felt naked, exposed, a common weed suddenly thrust into the manicured garden of high society. Mr. Henderson, the manager, a man whose face was usually a mask of professional affability, scurried towards them, his smile strained. Mrs. Vance, a pleasure. Is there a problem? Eleanor ignored him, her gaze laser-focused on Anna. That waitress is wearing my deceased daughter's necklace. How did she get it? I want it back, and I want the police called. The word police sent a jolt of icy terror through Anna. She was a nobody, a girl who stretched her budget thin with thrift store finds and generic brands. A girl whose only family was a faded photograph of 2 unknown faces tucked safely away in her wallet. Against Eleanor Vance, she was nothing. Please, Anna begged, her voice trembling. This necklace is mine. I've had it my whole life. Eleanor's laugh was sharp, bitter. Your whole life? My daughter Amelia died 22 years ago in a car crash. The locket was lost then. It was a custom piece from Tiffany's, designed by Elsa Peretti herself. She advanced on Anna, her eyes burning with righteous fury. Don't you dare lie to me, girl. Richard stepped between them, a wall of calm authority. Mother, discretion, please. He turned to Anna, his eyes holding a strange mixture of pity and suspicion. Miss, my mother is understandably distressed. That locket is identical to one of immense sentimental value to our family. Please tell us where you acquired it. Desperation clawed at Anna's throat. How could she explain something she didn't understand herself? I didn't acquire it. It was with me when I was left at St. Jude's Home for Children. It's the only thing I have from my parents. The mention of the orphanage seemed to momentarily disarm Eleanor. A flicker of something unreadable, a shadow of regret perhaps, crossed her face before the mask of cold fury snapped back into place. An orphanage? A convenient story. A thief who has rehearsed her lines. I'm not a thief, Anna said, her voice gaining strength, fueled by the injustice of the accusation. Her integrity was the one thing she truly owned, the shield she had polished and protected against the constant onslaught of hardship. Mr. Henderson, sensing a PR disaster brewing, made a swift decision. Anna, take off the necklace and give it to Mrs. Vance. We'll sort this out in my office. Anna recoiled as if struck. Giving up the locket felt like giving up a part of herself. It was her identity, her history, the faint hope that someday someone might recognize it, might recognize her. It was proof that she had once been loved, even if just for a fleeting moment. Give it to me, you little thief! Eleanor lunged, her manicured fingers reaching for Anna's throat. Richard caught her arm, his voice booming through the restaurant. Mother, enough! He turned to Mr. Henderson. There will be no police, not yet, but we're not leaving without answers. He looked at Anna, his expression hardening. You said you came from an orphanage. Which one? Anna swallowed, her throat dry with fear. St. Jude's Home for Children, on the east side. Eleanor Vance's perfectly made-up face went deathly pale. Richard's grip on his mother's arm tightened. The name clearly held significance. A dark secret bubbling to the surface. A new, more confusing silence fell over the room as the billionaire and the waitress stood locked in a tableau of accusation and defiance, bound together by a simple silver star that held secrets neither of them fully understood. Mr. Henderson's office, small and smelling faintly of stale coffee and desperation, felt like a cage closing around Anna. Eleanor Vance, now like a panther in a zoo exhibit, chose to stand while Richard Vance stood by the window, looking out at the bustling street. I've called the head office for guidance on this delicate matter, Mr. Henderson said, wringing his hands. He was clearly out of his depth, caught between a litigious billionaire and the possibility of a wrongful termination lawsuit. Guidance, Eleanor snapped, turning to face him. The guidance is always simple. The girl is a common thief who has possession of my family's property. The necklace is worth perhaps $5,000 in materials, but its sentimental value is immeasurable. I want it back, and I want her charged. It's not yours, Anna insisted, her voice shaking, but resolute. It's mine. She looked at Richard, appealing to the only person in the room who seemed to have a shred of reason. I can prove it. The clasp is broken. It's been repaired with a slightly different colored silver. It's been that way for as long as I can remember. Eleanor stopped pacing. What did you say? The clasp? Anna repeated, her fingers tracing the tiny imperfection on the back of her neck. It was broken, and someone fixed it. You can see the solder mark if you look closely. Richard turned from the window, his brow furrowed in thought. He walked over to his mother. Mother, he said in a low, urgent tone, don't you remember? Amelia was always careless with her jewelry. She broke the clasp on the locket a month after you gave it to her. She was devastated. Dad took it to a local jeweler to have it fixed quickly because the wait at Tiffany's was too long. He always complained the man used the wrong grade of silver for the repair. Eleanor stared at her son, her mouth slightly agape. The furious certainty in her eyes began to waver, replaced by a dawning confusion. She looked back at Anna, truly seeing her for the first time, not as a thief, but as a puzzle, a painful, impossible puzzle. How could you know that? Eleanor whispered, the question hanging in the air. I don't know, Anna said, her own confusion mounting. I just know my necklace has a repaired clasp. That's all. Mr. Henderson, sensing a shift in the dynamics, cleared his throat. Mrs. Vance, the young lady mentioned St. Jude's Home for Children. Perhaps confirming her story would be a productive next step. Eleanor's mind was a whirlwind. The detail about the clasp was a direct hit, a crack in the foundation of her grief-stricken rage. For 22 years, she had believed Amelia died in that fiery crash on the Pacific Coast Highway. The official report said her car had gone over a cliff. They never recovered a body, but the wreck was definitive. The personal effects found at the scene were minimal, and the locket, her daughter's most prized possession, was missing. The police had assumed it was either destroyed in the fire or taken by a looter. To Eleanor, its absence was just another cruel twist of fate. Now here it was, around the neck of an orphan who knew its most intimate secret. Get the director of St. Jude's on the phone, Eleanor commanded, her voice regaining its steel, but with a new uncertain tremor beneath it. Richard pulled out his phone. What's the name of the director there now? It was Mrs. Gable when I left 6 years ago. I don't know if she's still there, Anna offered meekly. Richard made the call, his voice a low, polite murmur as he explained the situation. After a few minutes, he put the phone on speaker. A kind but weary voice filled the small office. This is Elena Gable, director of St. Jude's. How can I help you, Mrs. Gable? Richard began. My name is Richard Vance. We are here with a young woman named Anna Peters, who I believe was a resident at your home. Anna, of course, I remember Anna. Mrs. Gable's voice warmed instantly. A lovely girl, bright, determined. One of our biggest success stories. Is she all right? I'm fine, Mrs. Gable, Anna said, her voice thick with emotion at hearing the familiar, comforting tone. Mrs. Gable, Richard continued gently, Anna is in possession of a piece of jewelry, a silver locket. She claims she has had it since she arrived at St. Jude's. Can you confirm this? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Anna held her breath. Yes, I can, Mrs. Gable said definitively. I was the one who processed her intake. I'll never forget it. She was just a baby, no more than a few days old, left on our doorstep on a cold October morning, wrapped in a simple cotton blanket with nothing but that locket pinned to it. No note, no name. We named her Anna ourselves. That little star locket was the only thing she had in the entire world. It's documented in her intake file, which I have right here in my archives. The air rushed out of Anna's lungs in a sob of relief. Eleanor Vance sank into the chair opposite her, all the fight draining out of her, leaving behind a frail, bewildered old woman. The necklace wasn't stolen. The girl wasn't a thief. This was something far more complicated and far more painful. Mrs. Gable? Eleanor's voice was a strained rasp. Can you tell me the exact date she was found? Of course, let me see. The sound of rustling paper came through the phone. Here it is. She was found on the morning of October 28th, 2003. Richard gasped. He looked at his mother, whose face had become a ghostly white. The blood had drained from it completely, leaving behind a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. October 28th, 2003. That was exactly 1 week after the fiery car crash that had supposedly claimed the life of her daughter, Amelia Vance. Richard watched his mother as she stood to leave the office. He knew the name meant something to them, something terrible, as they exited the Gilded Spoon. The drive to the Vance mansion in upstate New York was about to begin. It would be the most surreal experience of Anna's life. She would sit in the back of a black Maybach, the leather seat smoother than anything she had ever touched, and stare out at the blur of autumn foliage. Up front, Richard drove in silence, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror with an expression of deep concern. Beside him, Eleanor Vance would be a statue carved from grief and confusion. She wouldn't speak a single word since hearing the date from Mrs. Gable. The mansion wasn't just a house, it was an estate, a sprawling stone edifice that looked more like a European castle than a private home. As they swept up the long winding driveway, Anna felt an overwhelming sense of being out of place. a stray dog brought into a palace. Inside, the home was opulent but somber. Vast rooms were filled with antique furniture, priceless art, and an unnerving silence that seemed to hum with unspoken sorrow. A portrait of a young woman hung above the grand fireplace in the main hall. She had Eleanor's sharp cheekbones and Richard's kind eyes. Her smile was bright and a little rebellious. She was wearing the star locket. She'd soon find herself looking at the portrait above the fireplace. A fire Amelia would have been staring at with that familiar star locket hanging from her neck. She'd heard the name. "That's Amelia," Richard said softly, noticing Anna's gaze. Eleanor walked slowly towards the portrait, her hand outstretched as if to touch the painted face. "My little star," she whispered, her voice breaking. She turned her eyes, boring into Anna. "My daughter is dead, but her necklace, her most precious possession, was found pinned to a baby a week after her death. A baby left on the steps of an orphanage not 50 mirrors from where the accident happened." "Explain that." It wasn't a question. It was a demand, a plea to the universe to make sense of the impossible. "I can't," Anna said, feeling helpless. "I wish I could." Richard guided his mother to a velvet-upholstered sofa. "Mother, we need to think. Logic, facts. What do we know?" He began to pace just as his mother had in the office, but his energy was analytical, not frantic. Fact 1. Amelia died in the crash on October the 21st. Fact 2. The locket was not found at the scene. Fact 3. A baby, Anna, was found with the locket on October 28th. There's a missing week. There's a missing explanation. Perhaps a first responder stole it and in a fit of conscience left it with the baby, Eleanor theorized, her voice weak. A first responder with a secret baby they wanted to abandon. "It seems convoluted," Richard countered. He stopped pacing and looked at the portrait again. "Amelia was unhappy, Mother. We both know that she felt suffocated." "She was a Vance," Eleanor retorted, a spark of her old fire returning. "She had every advantage, every opportunity. I only wanted the best for her." "You wanted her to be a carbon copy of you," Richard said, his tone gentle but firm. "You pushed her to marry Carter Hastings, a man she despised. You dismissed her passion for art as a childish hobby. The last year of her life, we barely spoke. We fought constantly. Don't you remember that last fight, the day before she drove out to California?" Eleanor flinched as if struck. The memory was clearly a painful one. Anna felt like an intruder listening now, listening to this deeply personal family history. She stood awkwardly by the door, clutching the strap of her worn messenger bag. "Maybe I should go," she said quietly. You have a lot to talk about." "No," Eleanor said, her voice sharp. "You are the center of this. You will stay." She looked at her son. "What are you implying, Richard?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm just trying to look at this from every angle," he said. But his eyes told a different story. He was following a thread, a thought he was not yet ready to voice. "I'm going up to her room." "No one has been in that room in 22 years, Eleanor said, her voice trembling. "It's exactly as she left it." "Then it's time someone went in," Richard replied, and he strode toward the grand staircase, leaving Anna alone with the formidable matriarch. A heavy silence descended. Anna didn't know where to look. Eleanor simply stared at the portrait of her lost daughter. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, Richard's footsteps echoed from the top of the stairs. He was holding something in his hands, a dusty leather-bound book, a diary. He walked over and handed it to his mother. "It was tucked under a loose floorboard beneath her bed," he said, his voice strained. "I think you need to read the last entry." With trembling hands, Eleanor Vance opened the diary. Richard had marked the page. Her eyes scanned the familiar looping handwriting of her daughter. As she read, her face contorted, shifting from confusion to disbelief to horror, and finally to a level of soul-crushing anguish that made Anna's heart ache for her. A strangled sob escaped Eleanor's lips as she dropped the diary. It fell open on the floor. Anna couldn't help but see the last few lines written in a frantic, desperate scrawl. "Mother will never accept him, and she will never accept my baby. She will try to control its life just like she controlled mine. I can't let that happen. I have to disappear. The car, I'll push it over the cliff. I've siphoned most of the gas. It will burn. They'll think I'm dead. It's the only way. I'm leaving tonight to go to him, and I'm leaving my little star with the only piece of me I can give her. I'm so sorry, my love. Forgive me. Maybe someday you'll understand. Always shine. For Mom. Amelia Vance hadn't died in a car crash. She had run away. She had staged her own death. And a week later, after giving birth, she had left her baby, her daughter Anna, on the steps of an orphanage with the only thing she had left to give a silver locket shaped like a star. The revelation in the diary shattered the 22-year-old foundation of grief upon which the Vance family had been built. The ghost of Amelia was suddenly, shockingly alive. Eleanor was inconsolable. The truth was a far crueler reality than the lie she had lived with. Her daughter hadn't been taken from her by a tragic accident. She had been driven away by her own actions. The sobs that racked Eleanor's body were not just of loss, but of a profound, soul-deep guilt. Richard picked up the diary and guided his mother back to the sofa. He sat beside her, his arm around her shaking shoulders, and began to read aloud from earlier entries. Anna, no longer an outsider, but the living embodiment of this secret history, sat in a nearby armchair, listening as the story of her own life began to unfold. Amelia's words painted a vivid picture of a young woman trapped in a gilded cage. January 12, 2003. Mother introduced me to Carter Hastings III today. He has a perfect smile and the soul of a balance sheet. She calls him a suitable match. I call him a life sentence. She doesn't see me. She only sees the Vance legacy, a dynasty I am expected to perpetuate with a man who looks at me like I'm a prize mare. March 4th, 2003. I met someone. His name is Leo. He's an artist. He has paint under his fingernails and sees colors in the world I never knew existed. He doesn't care that my last name is Vance. He asked me what my dreams were, and for the first time in my life, I didn't have to lie. I told him I wanted to paint sunsets, not host galas. He didn't laugh. The entries chronicled a secret, passionate love affair. They met in clandestine coffee shops in Greenwich Village and spent weekends in a tiny, drafty studio filled with the smell of turpentine and possibility. Leo was everything the Vance world was not: poor, free-spirited, and utterly unimpressed by wealth. June 22, 2003. I told Mother I wanted to apply to the Rhode Island School of Design. She called it a frivolous indulgence. She said my duty was to the family to marry Carter and take my seat on the board of the Vance Foundation. We had the worst fight of our lives. Sometimes I think she hates the part of me that isn't just a reflection of her. Then came the entry that changed everything. August 30th, 2003. I'm pregnant. Leo's and mine. I'm terrified and ecstatic. A little piece of us. A little piece of pure love untainted by money or legacy. Leo was overjoyed. He wants to run away together to Oregon where his sister lives. He says we can live simply. We can be a family. But I am so scared. Mother will find out. She will never let this happen. She'll use her money and her power to take the baby from me. She'll say I'm an unfit mother, that Leo is a gold digger. She will destroy him to get to my child. The final entries were a frantic, heartbreaking plan. The idea to stage her death was born of desperation. It was the only way she could imagine to truly be free, to protect her child from the crushing weight of the Vance name and Eleanor's controlling influence. She was pregnant. Eleanor whispered the words, catching in her throat. I never knew. I drove my own daughter to fake her death. The full weight of her actions seemed to land on her all at once, aging her a decade in a single minute. Richard closed the diary, his own eyes wet with tears. She did it to protect her child, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He looked across the room at Anna. To protect you. Anna felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. This whole time she had thought she was an orphan, a child of anonymity, a blank slate. Now suddenly she had a history, a mother who had loved her so much that she had erased her own existence for her, a grandmother whose suffocating love had inadvertently caused it all, an uncle who looked at her with 2 decades of lost time in his eyes. It was too much. She stood up, feeling a desperate need for air. I think I need a minute. She stumbled out through a pair of French doors onto a stone terrace overlooking a vast manicured garden. The cold autumn air was a shock to her system, but a welcome one. She leaned against the balustrade, her fingers tracing the familiar shape of the star locket through her thin shirt. Her mother was alive. Her mother had given her up. Both thoughts were a confusing mix of elation and a deep, aching pain of abandonment. She had been loved, and she had been left. After a few minutes, Richard joined her on the terrace. He stood beside her, not speaking, simply sharing the silence. "My mother's name is Amelia." Anna said the words feeling foreign and strange on her tongue. "And my father's name is Leo." "Yes," Richard said softly. "I remember her talking about him now. She called him her escape. I thought it was just youthful rebellion. I never imagined." He trailed off, shaking his head. "What happens now?" Anna asked, her voice small. Richard looked at her, his expression one of grim determination. "Now," he said, "we find them. We find my sister, and we find your father." He turned back toward the house, towards his speaking, simply sharing the silence. "My mother's name is Amelia." Anna said the words feeling foreign and strange on her tongue. "And my father's name is Leo." "Yes," Richard said softly. "I remember her talking about him now. She called him her escape. I thought it was just youthful rebellion. I never imagined." He trailed off, shaking his head. "What happens now?" Anna asked, her voice small. Richard looked at her, his expression one of grim determination. "Now," he said, "we find them. We find my sister, and we find your father." He turned back toward the house, towards his broken mother. "The Vance family has resources. We have investigators' contacts all over the world. For 22 years, we mourned a ghost. Now we have a trail to follow, a trail that starts with a man named Leo, an artist who loved my sister and dreamed of a life in Oregon." For the first time that day, a flicker of hope ignited in Anna's chest. The locket around her neck no longer felt like a remnant of a forgotten past, but a compass pointing toward an unknown future. The Vance machine, once a tool of corporate conquest and social dominance, was re-engineered for a single purpose: to find Amelia. Richard took charge, his calm demeanor masking a ferocious intensity. He hired a team of the best private investigators in the country, led by a former FBI agent named David Brown. The first briefing took place in the mansion's vast library. Maps were spread across a massive oak table. Laptops hummed. Anna sat beside Richard, feeling like a character in a movie. 2 days ago, she had been worried about paying her rent. Today, she was part of an international search for her long-lost mother. "The name Leo is common?" Brown began, his voice all business. "An artist is a vague profession. The diary gives us a few clues. He lived in Greenwich Village in 2003. He specialized in landscape paintings, particularly sunsets, and he had a sister in Oregon. That's our strongest lead." The investigators went to work. They cross-referenced birth records, art school enrollment lists from the early 2000s, and property deeds in Oregon. Days turned into weeks. Anna continued her shifts at the Gilded Spoon, the familiar routine, a strange anchor in her new turbulent life. Mr. Henderson treated her with a newfound nervous respect. Her co-workers buzzed with rumors. The story of the billionaire and the waitress had become a piece of restaurant lore. During this time, a fragile, tentative relationship began to form between Anna and Elelanina. The elder Vance was a changed woman. The hard, imperious shell had been stripped away, revealing a core of raw regret. She would summon Anna to the mansion for tea, where she would sit in silence for long stretches before asking small, hesitant questions. "Did you have a happy childhood?" Elelanina asked one afternoon, her gaze fixed on a porcelain teacup. "I did," Anna answered honestly. "Mrs. Gable and the staff at St. Jude's were kind. It was lonely sometimes. I always wondered about my parents. I used to make up stories about them, that they were spies or explorers who would come back for me one day." Elelanina flinched. "Your mother, Amelia, she loved art. Do you have any artistic talent?" Anna shook her head. "No, I'm studying to be a social worker. I want to work with kids in the system." A flicker of something pride-sadness crossed Elelanina's face. "That is a noble profession, a useful profession." The word useful was uttered with a hint of her old self, a woman who measured worth in tangible outcomes. But then she softened. "Amelia would be proud of you." It was the first time she had acknowledged Anna as Amelia's daughter so directly. The words hung in the air between them, a bridge across a chasm of secrets and pain. A week later, there was a breakthrough. Brown's team had found him. His full name was Leo Garrison. He had indeed been a student at the New York Studio School in 2003, but the trail went cold after that. He had seemingly vanished along with Amelia. The Oregon lead, however, had borne fruit. They found a property record for a small cottage in a coastal town called Cannon Beach, purchased in 2004 by a woman named Sarah Garrison, Leo's sister. "There's more," Brown said, his voice tight with excitement during a conference call. Sarah Garrison passed away 3 years ago from cancer. The cottage was left to its sole other resident, a woman who goes by the name Mia Collins. Richard pulled up the Oregon DMV database on his laptop. He typed in the name. A driver's license photo appeared on the screen. The room fell silent. It was her. She was older, her face lined with the faint traces of sun and worry, her hair shorter and flecked with gray. But there was no mistaking the eyes. They were Richard's eyes. They were Ella Lenina's eyes. They were the eyes that had smiled down from the portrait in the main hall. It was Amelia Vance. Anna's heart hammered against her ribs. She stared at the screen at the face of the woman who had given her life and then given her up. She looked normal, like someone you might see at a grocery store or a library. She was no longer a myth from a diary. She was a real person living in a small town on the other side of the country. "And Leo Garrison?" Richard asked, his voice strained. Brown's tone became somber. "We found a death certificate. Leo Garrison passed away in 2010. Leukemia. He was only 32. The news hit Anna with a surprising force. A father she had never known, now gone forever. She looked at the photo of her mother on the screen and imagined her grief facing that loss alone. The story in her head was becoming more real, more painful with every new detail. Elena, who had been listening on speakerphone from her study, let out a soft, guttural sound. "She's been alone all this time," she whispered. "My daughter has been alone." "Book a flight," Richard said, his decision instantaneous. "We're going to Oregon, all of us." He looked at Anna. "If you're willing to come." Anna nodded, unable to speak. Her entire life had been a question mark. Now she was hurtling towards the answer. Cannon Beach. Oregon was a world away from the steel and glass canyons of New York. The air smelled of salt and pine, and the dominant sound was the rhythmic crash of Pacific waves against the shore. The town was small, nestled against a coastline dominated by the monolithic Haystack Rock. It was a place where someone could disappear, a place where they could become someone new. They rented a discreet SUV and drove to the address listed for Mia Collins. The cottage was small and weathered, painted a cheerful sea blue with a garden full of wind-blown flowers and sculpted driftwood. A plume of smoke curled from a stone chimney. Through a large front window, they could see canvases stacked against a wall. They parked down the street, the three of them sitting in the car, suspended in a moment of shared anxiety. What would they say? How do you broach a subject that is 22 years old and buried under a mountain of lies? "I should go first," Richard said, "alone. It might be less of a shock." Elena surprisingly agreed. "Yes, she might run if she sees me." Anna's hands were sweating. "What about me?" Richard turned in his seat to look at her. "Anna, this is going to be the hardest conversation of her life. Seeing you, you are the living proof of everything. Let me break the ice. Let me tell her that we know, and that we're not here to hurt her." Anna knotted her throat too tight to speak. She watched as Richard got out of the car and walked up the gravel path to the blue cottage. He hesitated for a moment on the porch, then knocked softly on the door. The door opened. A woman appeared. It was her, Amelia. Mia. She looked surprised to see a well-dressed stranger on her doorstep. They could see her talking, gesturing, a confused look on her face. Richard said something and her entire posture changed. Her body went rigid. She shook her head, took a step back, and tried to close the door. Richard put his hand on it gently, not to force it open, but to keep it from closing. He spoke again, his expression earnest and pleading. They couldn't hear the words, but they could see the emotional earthquake happening on the porch. Amelia's face crumpled. She sagged against the doorframe, her hand flying to her mouth. Richard said one more thing, and then she slowly, hesitantly stepped aside and let him in. The door closed, leaving Elena and Anna alone in the silent car. They waited 10 minutes, 20, 40, an hour. Elena stared at the cottage, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. I destroyed her life, she murmured more to herself than to Anna. In trying to control her, I lost her completely. What if she never forgives me? You didn't know, Anna said softly, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to comfort. I should have, Eleanor said, her voice filled with self-remation. I should have listened. I should have seen my daughter instead of my legacy. Finally, the cottage door opened again. Richard emerged, his face pale and emotionally exhausted. He walked back to the car and got in, closing the door with a heavy sigh. She knows, he said. She knows everything. How we found out. She's in shock. She never thought this day would come. He paused, gathering himself. Leo passed away 15 years ago. She's been here ever since, making a quiet life, selling her paintings to tourists. She thought it was the only way to keep her daughter safe. He turned to Anna. She's terrified. She wants to see you, but she's afraid you'll hate her. Anna's heart felt like it was going to beat out of her chest. Hate her? How could she hate the woman whose diary was filled with such love and sacrifice? How could she hate the woman who had given her the only clue to her own existence? I don't hate her, Anna whispered. I know, Richard said. He then looked at his mother. She's agreed to see you too, Mother. But you have to let her speak. You have to listen. No demands, no expectations. Just listen. Eliana nodded, tears streaming silently down her face. It was Anna's turn. She got out of the car on trembling legs and walked the same path Richard had walked. Each step was a step toward her past, toward the beginning of her own story. She raised her hand and knocked. The door opened, and there she was, her mother. Amelia's eyes, the same kind eyes as her brother's, were wide and filled with a universe of fear, hope, and sorrow. They immediately dropped to the locket at Anna's neck. A choked sob escaped her lips. My little star, Amelia whispered, her voice rusty from crying. Anna couldn't find any words. She simply reached up her fingers, fumbling with the broken clasp she knew so well. She unhooked the locket from her own neck and held it out in the palm of her hand. You left this for me, Anna said, her voice finally breaking through the wall of emotion. I think it's time you had it back. It was the only thing she could think to do, a gesture to bridge the chasm of 22 years. Amelia looked at the locket, then back at the face of the daughter she had only held for a few fleeting days. With a cry that seemed to carry all the pain and love of a lifetime, she stepped forward and pulled Anna into her arms, holding on as if she would never let go again. The reunion was not a single cinematic moment, but a series of fragile, painful, and ultimately beautiful conversations that stretched over the next few days. They talked in the cozy, cluttered living room of the cottage, surrounded by Amelia's art, vibrant, emotional paintings of the Oregon coast. The reunion between Amelia and Elena was the most fraught. The first hour was filled with tears and accusations, years of pent-up anger and hurt pouring from Amelia. She spoke of her fear, her feeling of being erased, of having her choices taken away. But Elena, for the first time in her daughter's life, simply listened. She absorbed the anger, acknowledged the pain, and offered no excuses, only a profound and broken apology. I was wrong, Eleanor said, her voice stripped of all its former authority. My pride and my ambition cost me my daughter, and they cost me the chance to know my granddaughter. I can never get those years back. I can only ask for your forgiveness. It was the start of a long and difficult healing process, but it was a start. For Anna and Amelia, it was different. It was a process of discovery. They walked for hours along the beach, the salty wind whipping around them. Amelia told Anna about Leo, about his kindness, his laugh, and the fierce love he had for the daughter he never got to meet. She explained the agony of her decision, leaving her baby on the steps of St. Jude's, watching from a car down the street until she was safely taken inside. I never stopped thinking about you, Amelia said, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Not for one whole day. Every birthday, I would buy a cupcake and light a candle, and wonder where you were, if you were happy, if you were loved. Leaving you was the hardest thing I have ever done. But I truly believed I was saving you from a life you wouldn't have chosen. Anna, in turn, shared her life story. The quiet loneliness of the orphanage, the fierce determination to make something of herself, the ghost-like feeling of having no history. She showed Amelia the worn photograph of the unknown couple she had once pretended were her parents. I always felt like a piece of me was missing, Anna confessed. Now it's not missing anymore. It's just a lot to take in. They were strangers, mother and daughter, bound by blood and a silver locket. They had to learn each other's rhythms, the sound of each other's laughter, the stories that made them who they were. A few months later, things had found a new tentative normal. Anna finished her semester, graduating with honors. Elena Vance, in an act of quiet redemption, established a multi-million-dollar foundation to support children aging out of the foster care system, with Anna appointed to the board of directors. It was her way of giving back, of honoring the system that had cared for the granddaughter she had never known. Amelia did not return to the Vance empire in New York. The life she had built on the coast was hers, earned through hardship and resilience. But she no longer lived in hiding. She began to sign her paintings with her real name, Amelia Vance Garrison. She and Elena spoke on the phone every week. Anna found herself with something she never thought she'd have: choices. She could stay in New York, close to her newfound grandmother and uncle, and pursue her career in social work. Or she could move to Oregon, to a small windswept cottage by the sea, and get to know the quiet, artistic woman who was her mother. On a mild spring evening, Anna sat with Amelia on the porch of the cottage, watching the sun dip below the Pacific, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and pink. Amelia was sketching in a notepad. Anna reached up and touched the star locket, which now rested back in its rightful place around her neck. Amelia had insisted she keep it. "It was never really mine to have back," Amelia had said. "It was always yours, a promise that I was out there somewhere thinking of you." "What are you going to do now?" "Mom." Anna asked the word mom, feeling more natural with each passing day. Amelia stopped sketching and looked at her daughter, a soft, peaceful smile on her face. For the first time in a very long time, she said, "I don't have to hide. I don't have to run. I think I'm just going to paint and get to know my daughter." She turned to Anna, her eyes shining. "What about you?" Anna looked out at the endless ocean, then back at her mother. She didn't have all the answers. The past was still a complicated map she was learning to read, and the future was a blank canvas. But for the first time in her life, she felt whole. She had a family. She had a history. She knew who she was. "I think," Anna said, a smile spreading across her face, "I'm going to do a little bit of both." The locket, once a symbol of a lonely mystery, had become a beacon of hope and connection, a testament to the fact that even after decades of darkness, a little star can still find its way home. A year can reforge a world. For the Vances, it had been a year of quiet reconstruction, of building a family out of the rubble of secrets. The shock had subsided, replaced by the steady, complex reality of their new lives. Anna, no longer a waitress, was now the formidable executive director of the St. Jude Foundation, the charity Elena had established to support youth in foster care. With Vance resources, but her own hard-won empathy, she had found her true calling. Elena, in turn, had found redemption in her granddaughter, ceding control and learning to listen. Richard remained the family's anchor, a steady, supportive presence for them all. Amelia had spent the year healing in Oregon, but now she had taken her boldest step, a return to New York, not as a ghost, but as an artist. A prestigious Soho gallery was hosting her first major exhibition, Mia Collins, an autobiography in landscape. The art world was buzzing. The lost daughter of the Vance dynasty was finally telling her story. The night of the gallery opening was electric. The stark white walls were alive with Amelia's canvases of the turbulent Oregon coast. In the center of the main room, on a wall all its own, was a breathtaking portrait of a young man with paint under his fingernails and a galaxy of dreams in his eyes. The placard read, "Leo, 2009. Anna stood before the painting of her father, a man she knew only through this vibrant image. "He would have been so proud of you," Amelia said softly, joining her. She looked elegant, but impossibly nervous. "Of both of us." I feel like I know him, Anna replied, her voice thick with emotion. You have his heart, Amelia smiled. He never cared for money or status, only truth and beauty. From across the room, Elena watched them. A critic at her elbow praised Amelia's talent, calling her lost years a tragedy. A year ago, Elena would have agreed. Tonight, she saw it differently. It's not a tragedy, she corrected him, her voice quiet but firm. It was her life, and it was necessary for this. With a small nod to Richard, she slipped out of the gallery. It wasn't an escape. It was a gift of space, a final relinquishing of control that spoke volumes. As admirers surrounded Amelia, a flashbulb went off. A tabloid reporter had slipped past security. Amelia Vance, is it true you faked your death to hide a secret child from your family? He shouted. The crowd gasped. Amelia froze, old panic flaring in her eyes. But before she could retreat, Anna stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with her mother. Her voice was calm and steady, carrying a newfound authority. My mother's name is Amelia Vance Garrison, Anna stated clearly. She is one of the most brilliant artists of her generation, and I am her daughter. We are not a scandal. We are a family. And this, she said, gesturing to the magnificent art, is her story. If you have any questions, they should be about her work. Her poise was absolute. The reporter, deflated by her words and the crowd's disapproving glare, was swiftly escorted out. A smattering of applause broke the silence. Amelia looked at her daughter, her eyes shining with tears of gratitude and overwhelming pride. In that moment, the daughter had become the protector. Later that night, the four of them gathered in the grand hall of the Vance mansion. They stood before the old portrait of Amelia at 16, the girl with the star locket and a rebellious glint in her eye. To family, Richard toasted, raising a glass of champagne in all its complicated, beautiful forms. To family, they echoed. That girl, Amelia said, looking from the painting to her daughter, thought strength was about escaping. It took me 20 years to learn that real strength is about coming home. She then pulled a small velvet box from her pocket and handed it to Anna. Inside was not jewelry, but a single old-fashioned brass key. It's the key to the cottage in Oregon, Amelia explained. I'm getting a bigger studio, but I'm keeping that place. I want it to be yours, a place to go when the weight of this world is too much, a place to just be Anna. Anna closed her hand around the key, tears welling in her eyes. It was the greatest gift imaginable, not a fortune, but a sanctuary. She looked at the faces of her family, this strange and wonderful constellation she now belonged to. The star locket around her neck was cool against her skin. No longer a symbol of a lonely mystery, but a shining reminder that no matter how lost you may feel, you are always connected to the people who make you whole. The past was settled, the present was full, and the future was a canvas waiting to be painted. What an incredible journey of loss, secrets, and ultimate reunion. A single object, a silver locket, held the power to shatter a family's reality and piece it back together in a way no one could have ever imagined. It reminds us that things are not always as they seem, and that the truth, no matter how long it's buried, has a way of coming to light. From a tense confrontation in a restaurant to a tearful reunion on the Oregon coast, this story shows the unbreakable bond between a mother and a child and the power of forgiveness to heal even the deepest wounds. If this story of Anna, Amelia, and Elena touched your heart and kept you on the edge of your seat, please let us know in the comments below. What part of their story moved you the most? Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed this emotional roller coaster, and share it with someone who loves a story with drama and a powerful twist. And most importantly, make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you never miss another incredible real-life story like this one. Thank you for listening.